All is good? Excellent. Welcome this afternoon to the Somerville Museum. My name is Steve Yeomans. I'm with the board of directors here. We really appreciate y'all taking time out of your Sunday to come and I'm sorry? Oh, taking time out of your day to come hear our lecture series for this month. Before I go ahead and introduce our first lecturer, I'd like to point out that we are selling bricks currently, just like the ones that are outside the museum here. It's $250 for a smaller 4x8 brick, and it's $450 for the larger 8x8. And you can basically have anything you want printed on it. And we have forms that we can help show you how to fill out. And then we send it off, we get them back, and that's going to be part of our new walkway in the park area next to our museum building here. So please consider supporting us on a day-to-day basis by either a donation or by purchasing a brick. Our first speaker today is Mr. Robert Scarlett. Robert is formerly in the U.S. Air Force. He is currently a teacher at Fort Dorchester High School. Robert's on our board of directors, and I think you'll find him extremely interesting. Mr. Scarlett.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. As you said, we are here for this community. We're here to educate people about the things that are significant within this community, things that have happened within this community. So today, we're going to take a little trip through time. And we're going to talk about some things about this community that you may have known or not known. Specifically, troops that were stationed here in Somerville and some of the things that happened in downtown Charleston that are very, very related. So I'm going to go back a little bit. So from that first famous shot heard around the world, the start of the Revolutionary War, the first cannons that were fired in Charleston Harbor. From the beginning, you've had African Americans wanting to support and serve their community. So to begin with, as you see here, make sure I got my stuff up straight. All right. We're here today to talk about what we consider to be the real first Memorial Day celebration. Now, I'm going to get you there, trust me. I'm going to get you there. But I'm going to take you on a little trip in order to get you there. So be patient. So as I was saying, from the beginning, Revolutionary War, Civil War, African Americans have wanted to defend this nation, have wanted to take part in defending this nation. But that was not always allowed. Although we did participate in every war that America's ever fought, it doesn't mean it came easily or it was welcomed in the beginning. Let's be honest with that. So although they volunteered and they served in all these different wars, it actually was not until 1863 that African Americans were finally able to don the blue uniform to represent their country. Hence my Civil War Union hat that I'm wearing today. So I'm going to discuss the beginning, the formation of some of these earliest units and how they ended up contributing to our story. We're also going to talk about how they contributed to Somerville. Despite their mistreatment, despite their disrespect, they still contributed to Somerville. So as we celebrate what could easily be viewed as the first observance of Memorial Day, we're going to talk about how we got there. So with so much history in movies and television, I'm sure somebody in here can tell me where the first unit of black soldiers that actually fought for the Union, where did that happen? Anybody know? Not you, Dr. West. Where do you think was the first unit of black troops to fight for the Union Army? What do you think it was? Just shout out some states.
First South Carolina Volunteers.
Right, you guys been here before, haven't you? You're cheating, stop it. So yes, a lot of people automatically think about the movie Glory. And they think about the 54th Massachusetts, right? Yeah, right? That's what most people think about. But the first unit of African Americans to fight for the Union was right here in South Carolina. Along with units in Louisiana and Kansas, they fought the first battles way back in 1862. So why is that year significant? Why is it amazing that black troops fought for the Union in 1862? Anybody have a guess why that's so significant? I will tell you why that was so significant. It was not legal for blacks to fight with the Union Army until the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. It was against the law for them to fight for the Union. So how did that happen? How did we get there? Answer is simple. First South Carolina Volunteers was created by a man by the name of Major General David Hunter in 1862 with 500 men, mainly in the Beaufort area. It was not a legally sanctioned unit, although they did some raids in Georgia. They got their hands dirty fighting for the Union. The politics did not allow it to continue. So it did not survive for very long. Unfortunately for them, out of those 500 men that fought, not a large percentage of them were really volunteers. So he went and grabbed slaves off the Cotton Islands of St. Helena in the Beaufort area and like, hey, you're in the Union Army now. Congratulations, you're fighting for your country. So some were volunteers and some were not. But after the Emancipation Proclamation and the Militia Act that was part of the Emancipation Proclamation, the American military started accepting African American troops. And the 1st South Carolina Volunteers were officially allowed into the Union Army with a name change. They became the 33rd United States Colored Troops. Now, extra dangers came along with that designation as the first African American units. A proclamation by Confederate President Jefferson Davis indicated that if these particular soldiers were captured, they would not be considered prisoners of war. They would be considered runaway slaves. And they were going to be assigned to the state, and the state was going to auction them off to the highest bidder back into enslavement. And it wasn't any better for the white officers. The white officers were to be hanged for supporting black troops. So it was not easy. So you would think, I don't know if I'm going to do this. Either way, I'm going to die. Didn't stop them. Still, 180,000 African Americans volunteered, despite knowing what might happen. And we also must give credit to those white officers, who also, many of them volunteered, not all, but many of them volunteered to lead what they called at the time colored troops. All right, so that brings us a little bit closer to home. And I'm going to focus on my main group of African American troops in the Union Army that played a significant role in what we consider here to be one of the first observances of Memorial Day. These men actually operated and settled down right here in Summerville, South Carolina. Let me make sure you know this thing. Let me do my little cheat thing here. I gotta do that part. I gotta make sure I know for sure what's on my screen. Make sure I'm telling the truth here. There we go. All right. See, I was behind the slide. Can't trust technology. Okay, so this unit received an important measure of freedom through education while they were stationed here in Summerville. The 35th United States Colored Troops began as the 1st North Carolina Volunteers in New Bern, North Carolina. The unit was made up, of course, of white officers, because blacks were not allowed at the time to be officers, but a unit of black soldiers. Faced a multitude of obstacles. Black soldiers even faced racism from white officers who were forced to lead them. So not all the officers were happy about the assignment that they got. But the 35th, they were lucky in that regard, because their commanding officer came from a family whose name is synonymous with abolitionism, with the rights of the enslaved. As you may know, author Harriet Beecher Stowe is famous for writing a book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. And that book is credited with opening eyes of a lot of people in the North who just thought slavery was, they got to do some work and may not get paid very much. But, they get food, they get clothes. They probably out there in the South. And then that book blew their minds, the atrocities that were committed against these enslaved people. So a lot of people in the North became abolitionists because of her book. How is that relevant to our story today? Simple. James Chaplain Beecher brother of Harriet Beecher Stowe, was selected to lead this new unit, the 35th United States Colored Troops. That is very significant on why they were treated the way they were. Soon after the 1st North Carolina Volunteer Regiment completed recruitment, the name was changed to the 35th United States Colored Troops and was reassigned to Folly Island, we know Folly Beach today, Folly Island, South Carolina, to solidify forces around Charleston. Many questioned the abilities of black troops, but Colonel Beecher was adamant that they could serve just as well as white troops, which they did, even though they were, in many cases, paid half of what white troops were paid. The unit was made up of former slaves and free blacks of all ages. Men enlisted as young as 15 years old and as old as 67. That could be you, Joe. The unit was made up of mainly people from North Carolina. But when they got stationed here in Folly Island, many South Carolina folks volunteered for the new unit in 1863. The unit saw more action while stationed in South Carolina, fighting battles as part of General Sherman's March to the Sea in Honey Hill and DeVoe Neck, South Carolina in 1864. One of the many sad stories from the 35th in South Carolina included a man by the name of Benjamin Granby. He survived all of the Civil War battles, settled here in Summerville with his unit, and died of smallpox in the post hospital in Summerville. Rough life. So, where were they? 35th ended up here, camping basically in the area where Rollins School of the Arts is today. So most of you know where that area is, where they were camped at. On June 1st, 1866, the 35th disbanded after 3 years of service to the Union Army. Both whites and blacks saw how black soldiers made efforts to improve themselves while they were here, learning new skills, especially learning how to read and write. This portion of the presentation provides me an opportunity to remind you that you are in the Summerville Museum and Research Center. And the information I'm about to share with you was researched here in our archives, here in our research center about the 35th. In an article published in an 1898 magazine that is held right upstairs in our archives, you can see the cover. It's been through a lot. It's been through a lot. Frances Beecher Perkins, the wife of Colonel Beecher, discussed her efforts to educate the black troops under her husband's command. In the article, she praised the 35th United States Colored Troops by saying, and I quote, "I may truly say that during my whole time in the South, I saw no regiment more manly in appearance, none with straighter line or better drill, nor any more worthy of their uniform than that which was then called the 1st North Carolina Colored Volunteers." She goes on to discuss the education of the regiment, when she says, "My mornings were spent in teaching the men of our regiment to read and write, and it became my pleasing duty and habit, whenever our moving tents were pitched, there to set up our school. Sometimes the chaplain assisted, and sometimes the officers, and the result was that when the men came to be mustered out, each one of them could proudly sign his name to the payroll in a good legible hand. When enlisted, all but 2 or 3 of them were obliged to put a mark to their names as written by the paymaster." Here's an example of what they would actually have to do. They would not write John Jones. Someone else would write John Jones, and they would just mark the X to accept that that's them. We should not dismiss the importance of someone being able to do something as simple as write their own name. When I look at that, I think about the fact that when they can write their own name, they are not only saying who they are, but they're saying now, I expect you to treat me as an adult, as a man. Not only can I write my name, but I'm showing you my commitment. I am showing you that I took part in something larger than myself. But it also changes their opinion on what they expect people to treat them as. Self-esteem is a powerful thing, and especially if you can have it, you can endure a lot of hardship. Her efforts did not stop after the Union was disbanded. After the Union took command of Charleston, public schools were established, and Frances Beecher Perkins became principal pro tem of one of the schools. According to her, the school had 30 teachers and 600 students, most of them black students. She goes on to talk more about her time here in Summerville. She said, "Our next move was in July to Summerville, about 20 miles from Charleston, the headquarters of the 2nd Sub-District of the Military District of Charleston. Here, my husband was in command of a territory about 9 miles square, in which were 600 plantations, 2 quite large towns, and the Sea Islands so famous for their cotton. Summerville is today advertised in our northern papers as being a peculiarly healthful and attractive resort, and was then so considered by all the rice planters who were unable to remain on their plantations during the heat and malaria of the summer." If you don't know, that is how Summerville got started as a town. The fact that those planters were being chewed up by mosquitoes in downtown Charleston, right off the Ashley River, that they wanted a place where they could vacation and live when it's that terrible mosquito time, which is coming upon us now. So they would come to Summerville and they didn't have to deal with that. People weren't getting sick in Summerville. And Summerville became worldwide renowned for being a healthy place. And people would actually come here from around the world just to get better. Maybe one day we actually find a fountain of youth somewhere in Summerville. That wouldn't be a bad thing. She goes on to say how the soldiers of the 35th United States Colored Troops both benefited from their time in Summerville and how Summerville benefited from them being here. The bridge, she goes on to say how the soldiers of the 35th United States Colored Troops rebuilt the bridge that was damaged during the war. And that bridge is what we know of today as Bacon's Bridge. They rebuilt that bridge. The bridge was destroyed at the end of the war, likely by Confederates during their withdrawal from Charleston, although Miss Beecher had a different version of that. She said, "Another pleasure that autumn I recall with special vividness, a certain bridge over the Ashley on an important road about 5 miles from Summerville had been destroyed by our troops in the necessities of war and was again needed. My husband, being a man of versatile talent," which my wife would say things like that, "detailed a sufficient force of his men for the work, and in 3 weeks had thrown a very pretty and graceful structure over the river." Frances Beecher Perkins was not the only one to compliment the men of the 35th United States Colored Troops. In an article published in the South Carolina Leader, their author writes about the 35th. "At Summerville, they are opening the schools and striving by all the means in their power to get knowledge and fit themselves for a better life than has been the lot of some heretofore. The schools are under the charge of Mrs. Beecher and Miss Parker and are well conducted. The roads and bridges are being repaired, and the town is coming up to its old standard." Things were clearly looking up for many of these newly educated men. But don't just take my word for it. We actually have copies of the letters that they wrote to the newspaper telling their own tale. So I'm going to share with you one of these letters. We have several. And if you're interested, I'd be happy to email you all the rest of them, because they're interesting reading. So an African-American sergeant of the regiment writes optimistically about the future because of the opportunities granted to him through education. Here's part of what he said. "Mr. Editor, I feel like there is a good time coming when not only the citizens of the United States, but all citizens shall enjoy the rights of American citizenship. But I can say that Company G, 35th Regiment, are doing now what they should have done long ago, and that is to get an education." Hear that, Michael? One of my students. "We can boast of a first-rate teacher, and I hope that God will bless him, and likewise our captain. We are enjoying ourselves here very much and dividing our attention pretty equally between the useful and the ornamental." Now for the part of the story you came here for today. Another one of those stories almost lost to history, because racism is often an enemy of true history. Few people are aware of the first Memorial Day celebration, which was held in Charleston, South Carolina. Freed black residents of Charleston and Somerville, led by the Gullah community, organized a ceremony honoring fallen Union soldiers. For decades, this event was downplayed or denied by white residents, but recent research has brought it to light. According to information found in the Harvard University Library by historian David Blight, during the Civil War, the Confederate Army used the Washington Race Course and Jockey Club in Charleston, now Hampton Park, as an open-air prison for Union captives. Now, I want you to understand what open air means. That means there was no roof over their head. They were in prison outside with the elements. If it rained, they were there. If it snowed, unlikely, they were there. So it's no surprise that many of them died right there in Hampton Park. After the city of Charleston fell to Union troops, the Confederacy relocated thousands of captives, with the Washington Race Course serving as a primary holding area. It was intended to be temporary until a new stockade in Florence could be built. Most of the fallen Union soldiers who died at the Washington Race Course were initially held at the horrendous Confederate prison in Andersonville, Georgia. If you don't know about the prison in Andersonville, it was so terrible that the commander of the prison at Andersonville is the only person executed for their crimes during the Civil War. After the war was over, he was the only one punished by being executed for how poorly he treated Americans in that prison. Yes, even Jefferson Davis just went to jail for a couple of years and was released. The only real punishment was the leader of the Anderson prison. Conditions for Union prisoners who arrived at the Charleston Race Course offered little improvement over the horrendous conditions at Andersonville. Diseases, particularly smallpox and yellow fever, spread rapidly upon their arrival. At the war's end, Potter's Field, also known as Race Course Cemetery, held the remains of 257 Union soldiers, hastily buried in a mass grave behind the grandstand. And let me emphasize, when I say Union soldiers, I mean white and black. It wasn't because they were black, it was because they were Union. They were Yankees, another way of saying that. In April of 1865, local freedmen, including members of the 35th United States Colored Troops stationed here in Somerville, went to Potter's Field to exhume the remains from the mass grave and rebury them with dignity, the dignity they deserved based on their service. The Union soldiers were given respectful burials with grave markers, but without names because they did not know who was who. A tall, whitewashed fence was built around the cemetery, about 100 yards long and 50 to 60 yards deep. An archway was built, and the inscription was painted to read, "Martyrs of the Race Course." More than 3 years before the officially recognized start of Memorial Day, the occasion, first known as Decoration Day, was held in what is now called Hampton Park, named after Confederate General Wade Hampton III. The event began with a parade of 10,000 people on the old racetrack. The parade was led by 3,000 Gullah children from newly formed freedmen schools, carrying armloads of roses and singing the song John Brown's Body. Women bearing flowers and wreaths, and soldiers marching in the parade. Black preachers read from scripture, a black children's choir sang the national anthem, America the Beautiful, and several Negro spirituals. The event concluded with attendees returning to the racetrack to enjoy a picnic and a series of speeches. There were performances by black and white Union regiments, consisting of the famed 54th Massachusetts Regiment, alongside the 34th and 104th United States Colored Troops. These regiments performed a special double-column march around the gravesite. This official ceremony clearly qualifies as one of the earliest observances of Decoration Day, the precursor to Memorial Day. This event is not chronicled anywhere in South Carolina's official history. Most likely because it did not fit into the narrative of the lost cause. According to David Blight, Hampton Park replaced the gravesite of the martyrs of the racecourse. Thankfully, with the support of a generous benefactor from the North, the Union soldiers' final resting place was relocated in the 1870s. Their graves now found a more permanent home in the beautiful Beaufort National Cemetery. Before we welcome Dr. Ed West to the podium to discuss the return of Confederate troops, I want to briefly highlight the efforts of another true American hero, Ms. Clara Barton, who played a significant role in the lives of both Union and Confederate soldiers. No, she's not on here. When the American Civil War ended, with permission from President Abraham Lincoln, Clara Barton opened the Office of Missing Soldiers, helping to reconnect more than 20,000 soldiers with their families. During a trip to Switzerland in 1869, Clara Barton learned about the Red Cross movement. This experience, along with her nursing work during the U.S. Civil War, inspired Clara Barton to bring the Red Cross movement to America. On May 21st, 1881, Clara formed the American Red Cross, and she served as president for 23 years. This Memorial Day, as we enjoy time with our family, let us remember those who died in service to our country, known and unknown. And remember the Gullah people of Charleston, who very early in their freedom took it upon themselves to honor the fallen and plant the seeds of a national tradition.